East and West learning connections.
Helps people of different cultures break barriers and connect with each other.
Together, let's make learning and connections happen.
Together, we make cross-cultural learning and connections happen.
Thank you, Yang, for inviting Robin and I. In terms of the books where the book is called, the book that I brought, or the books that I brought are called Growing Somewhere, and it's about following your heart, especially after midlife. I wrote one of it's written by a fellow called Kelly Walker, a very well-known psychologist, presenter. He's has given hundreds, if not thousands, of talks across Canada and around the world in palliative care and other areas. But he speaks in this book to following your heart. He has, I think, a lot to say. So please take a book if you wish. There's no commitment to donate. Although Robin, I'm sure, will gladly accept any donation for her organization. So let's start. I indeed owned a medical company for 40 years. We worked globally. And from that, I founded the Superior Medical Foundation. My dear friend and colleague, Robin Mednick, who I'm so happy is here with me tonight. We don't see enough of each other. Founded Pencils for Kids with her colleagues, which works in Niger, West Africa, and has done incredible things, not only with women and children, but with all the peoples in an area called Labore, which I had the pleasure of visiting over a dozen years ago and seeing firsthand the incredible amount of work that she does. And I'm not going to steal her thunder, but I have, whenever we speak on the phone, we're constantly complimenting each other. But in Robin's case, it's, it's correct. This evening, Robin and I have a specific goal that I'd like to state from the very beginning. And it's something that I wish for you all to consider as we give you our comments this evening. In all your personal journeys in life, we wish to inspire you. We wish you to see the world through new eyes. We want you to be moved by compassion, to move beyond daily difficulties and view any act of compassion as a balm or a salve to your own struggles and challenges in life. You may have a good job, a wonderful relationship, a beautiful home, money in the bank, and yet you still may think something is missing. I think it's also a sign of our times with all the political discourse that we see in the media. People feel that there's a great deal of, there's a great deal of angst out there. So yes, we all have a lot to be thankful for in our lives, but often we're still worried and afraid. So instead of reaching out into the world, we close our hearts. We are afraid in case we get hurt or taken advantage of, or potentially lose what we've worked so hard to gain. So what should we do? I can assure you, as we all know, there's lots of unloved and neglected people in this world, and no, we cannot solve all the world's problems and woe. But we can sensitize ourselves through compassion, no matter how small an act. We can open our hearts and find, I believe, deep, soulful joy by simply reaching out into situations, even just a little bit, to find small victories in helping with the struggles of others. So please keep this in mind as Robin and I discuss our experiences, and we wish to inspire you to act. So Robin, would you give everyone a brief description of how it all started? Tell us about the components of what I call P4K, Pencils for Kids, presently on the ground in Labore, West Africa.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Yang, for, I can't believe you memorized that entire introduction. And Ron is an unbelievably humble and special person. So I am honored because my journey was very much influenced by Ron. But I'm going to take you back to 2005. My life was changed completely by a phone call. I was sitting at my desk. I picked up a phone to call a friend of mine. His name was Dan. And I was going over to the Commonwealth Games, Melbourne, with him soon. But when I spoke to him on the phone, he had just returned from 5 weeks in Niger, West Africa. And he sounded absolutely dreadful on the phone. He just was sad and could hardly speak. And I said, "What is wrong, Dan?" And he said, "Robin, I cannot get the images of the children of Niger out of my mind." He said some colleagues went to visit a school in Niger, and 30 children in one classroom were sharing one pencil. I don't know what it was. To this day, I don't know what it was about that one moment, because we hear bad things in the news every single day, and we don't react like I did. I had never reacted like that. I immediately said to Dan, "Stop talking. Let's just do something." And he said on the phone, "Well, what are we going to do?" I said, "I have no idea. I will call you back." And I remember hanging up the phone. I picked up the phone again, and I found the phone number for the government in Ottawa, and I asked them for the phone number of the embassy in Niger. They gave it to me. I immediately called it. And first they answered me in French. Niger is a French-speaking country. But then someone spoke English, and I said, "I heard there's 30, this is how naive I am. I heard there's 30 children sharing a pencil in a small community there. I'd like to send you pencils." And they said, "We're an embassy. You can't send us pencils, but we will find you someone." And before I hung up, they took my information. And within a few hours, I received an email from the embassy with the name of a man in it, Amadou Madugu, and a phone number. And I immediately called Amadou on the phone. Now, Amadou did not speak one word of English. And in my very poor French, which I studied in Canada, I managed to convey that I heard there were 30 children sharing a pencil. I don't know who he is. The embassy recommended him, but I would like to help. And he said, "Can you call back tonight at 7:00?" I said, "Okay." And at 7 that night, I called him, and his son, Mahmoud, answered the phone. And his son spoke a beautiful English. He was educated in the United States. And I said, "Mahmoud, I don't know who your dad is." He said, "My father is the mayor of a commune called Labore, and he was also the Minister of Education for the entire country before he was the mayor." And I said, "All right." I said, "Does he have a wish list? Does he know the things that he would like for his community?" And I found out that there were probably about 18 or 20 villages in this commune of Labore, and they said they would send me the wish list. A day or two later, I get an email with the wish list from another person I don't know. And the wish list has everything you can imagine on it: pens, paper, rulers, geometry sets, books, everything. I've got the list in my hand, which I printed out, and now I'm getting scared. What am I doing? Who are these people? What are they expecting from me? And can I fulfill that? But I took the list I got in my car. I drove to my local Office Depot. I walked in the doors and I went right up to the counter and I said, "Can I please speak to the manager?" And a man came out and he said, "Hi." And I said, "My name is Robin." He said, "My name is Michael." I said, "Michael, you don't know me. There's 30 children sharing a pencil in this community far away in a country I know nothing about. Can you help me?" And he looked at me and he said, "Robin, I decided this year it wasn't going to be about me. I want to join your team." I said, "Michael, I don't have a team, but you're on it." And so Michael and I together, remember, he did not know me. I had no credentials. I had no organization. He walked up and down the aisles of Office Depot. Together, we put together a box of supplies according to my wish list. And we decided that we would send it over to see if it made it there, if it was legitimate, if they got it, all of those things. But he didn't have some of the things on the list. So then I drove down the street to my local Staples. And I went and I spoke to the manager at Staples. And the manager said to me, when she heard my story, she said, "Go ahead and fill up the cart with the things you need." And she gave me $174 worth of supplies. She asked me to write a little letter on the spot at one of their computers just to make it legitimate. But she also, without knowing me, gave me that amount of supplies. Then I called Mahmoud back in Niger. I said, "Mahmoud, how am I going to get this to you?" He said, "We only trust DHL." I said, "What is DHL?" I know, that's how naive. And so I called DHL and I said, "How much will it cost for me to send one box over?" And they said, $500. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. The supplies have just been donated. So I asked if they did donations. They said it's difficult, and they can't. So then I thought, what do you do when you need to get something done? You call the president of any organization. So I found the phone number with help from my brother-in-law of the president of DHL Canada. And I faxed a letter. Remember in the days of faxes? We generally don't have them anymore. I faxed a letter, and about a day later, I got a phone call. And it was from DHL, and I got so excited. And it was a woman named Betty, and she said, "Did someone there fax us a letter?" And I said, "Yes, it was me." And she said, "We didn't get the letter. We only got the fax cover sheet, which really said, 'Here is a letter.'" And that it didn't even have the letter in it. So I said, "Betty, please don't hang up. There are 30 children sharing a pencil in a community far away. I need to send over this one box, and I'd like eventually to send over enough supplies for 3,000 students that I know were in their community." And Betty said, she heard the story and she said, "Let me call you back." A few hours goes by. What I learned a year later was that Betty then spoke to the president, a man named Ken Allen, and he said to her, because they got requests all the time from people, and he looked at Betty and he said, "What do you think we should do about this request?" And Betty said, "I like this one." She called me back a few hours later and she said, "Robin, we'll do it." I didn't know exactly what they'd do. So DHL picks it up at your house, but I did not know that, and I didn't want to be greedy. So I took the box and I drove it out to the airport to the DHL office, and I gave it to them, and they labeled it all. They sent it over Air Express. Within a week, the mayor received that box of supplies, and he called the Canadian embassy to witness the opening of that box. And that spoke volumes to me. I just felt good about that. I felt I could trust them. Michael Williams then at Office Depot came up with 3 more boxes, more supplies. And I nervously called DHL. And DHL said, yes, they would send it. Still, I didn't want to bother them to pick it up at my house. I drove it out to the airport. They flew it over to Niger. The mayor had a lot of students and only 100 school bags to give out in those 3 boxes. So he decided to have all of the villages come. And the top students were awarded one of those bags. They brought national television to show the ceremony of giving out those 100 school bags. By now, I was so moved, I was beginning with friends and colleagues to collect more boxes in the basement of my home, 24 boxes. I nervously called DHL, and DHL said, yes, they would do it. And I hired a moving van. I still didn't let them come to my house. And the moving van went out to the airport, and there I was on my hands and knees doing all of the paperwork. They shipped all of it Air Express, and the mayor received the 24 boxes a week later. And then he called me and he said in French, Madame Mednick, you must now, we don't want to open the boxes. You must come. We're now waiting for you to come and open the boxes. So now I figured I have to go to Niger, which I had never been to. This was the beginning of 2006. Actually, 2007, I made my first trip there. I showed up in Niger. My daughter was working in Ghana for Journalists for Human Rights. I said to my daughter, Sam, I'm going to pick you up. The 2 of us will fly to Niger. Niger is right next door to Ghana, but you need 4 flights to get there. That's Africa. On one of the flights to go from Ghana to Ivory Coast, I met a man sitting beside me on this small airplane. His name was Peter. He said, where are you going, Robin? I said, I'm going to Niger. He said, why are you going to Niger? Nobody goes to Niger. I told him the story of the 30 children, the pencil, the Staples, the Office Depot. And when he got off at Ivory Coast before Niger, he gave me $100. I said, Peter, don't give me your money. I don't know what I'm doing. We are not an organization. We have no charity. I said, Peter, please. He said, Robin, I trust you. He gave me that money and I put it in my pocket. We get to Niger, and the mayor and his entire entourage meet us at the airport. The only one who speaks English is Mahmoud. Thankfully, Mahmoud's at the airport. Through the course of the next few days, the mayor takes me to one of the villages where there is a very big ceremony. And those 24 boxes that have not been opened are now there for me to open. And in the boxes are the notebooks I have sent. And I brought, just to show you, a simple notebook. And my job in front of national television was, when every student came up to me, to hand out to them their very first notebook that they'd ever received. And I would clap so hard if it was a girl, because so many girls never got the opportunity to go to school. And we had this whole ceremony. Before I left Canada, I called the Canadian Embassy and I realized they might have some local money that they can give to some organizations and villages. And they said, come to visit us. So I took the mayor and the vice mayor and a number of the entourage over to the Canadian Embassy. And I said to them, do you have any? And the mayor did not know why he was there. And I said to the embassy, do you have any money? They said, well, we have some money for a school, but the applications are due in 3 weeks. So there's not really any time for you to apply for that. But after that, there could be money for fencing and security. We got out of that meeting and I pulled the mayor aside and I said, you have 3 weeks. I was not giving up on that 3 weeks money for a school. I said, you have 3 weeks. You get, and I knew he had been the Minister of Education, put in an application after I leave and do whatever you can to get money for that school. The next day, the mayor took me out to a remote village in the middle of nowhere. And in this remote village, in the middle of the desert, there were 3 chairs, one for me, one for the mayor, and one for the chief of the village. And the mayor began explaining in the local language of the chief, the local language in Niger is Zarma. And he started to explain to the chief and later said to me that he had told all the people in the village there that I had come to build a school. Exactly my reaction. What? And then he stood up and he said to me, Madame Mednick, and he took 10 paces over in the desert over there, looking at absolutely nothing, barren landscape. And he said, Madame Mednick, do you want the school over there? And then he took 10 paces to the other direction and he said, or Madame Mednick, would you like the school over there? My daughter was filming and I looked like a deer caught in the headlights. And I said, Monsieur le Maire, put the school wherever you want, hoping and praying that somehow we would find money for a school. On the way to the airport, as we got to the airport, on the end of my trip, I remembered that $100 burning a hole in my pocket. And I took it out and I looked at the mayor and I said, this is $100 from a man I met on an airplane that I don't know from England. And I want to give it to you. And he said to me, we will engrave that man's name on the first desk in the first school that we build together. I had tears in my eyes. I got home. I immediately called Peter in England. I said, Peter, you are not going to believe this. He said, Robin, you're not going to believe this. I went home to England. He worked for the Standard Chartered Bank. He said, and I told them what you're doing. And we are going to raise money. There's a man climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, and he's going to raise money on his climb we were now calling ourselves Pencils for Kids. I said, that is unbelievable. Within 6 weeks, the mayor had applied, within those 3 weeks, he had applied for money from the Canadian Embassy. And within 6 weeks, he was granted $69,000 for the building of the first ever Pencils for Kids school in that same barren village, Ulmantama, that he had taken me to. And only months later, the mayor called and said, the school is built and we need you to come back to open the school. By this time, other people in Toronto had heard about us, and my husband said he would come with me for the opening of the school. But my husband, who is sitting right here, a man I have loved dearly for 46 years, my husband thought they probably need ophthalmology supplies. And he began collecting in our basement boxes and boxes of supplies to do with ophthalmology that they could use. And you know what happened next. I nervously called DHL. And there were 34 boxes this time in my basement. I decided for the first time not to call a moving van. I let DHL, they said they would do it. They came to my house. Every time I see a DHL truck in the world, anywhere in the world, I kiss it. They came to my house. They picked up all the boxes. They shipped them so that when my husband and I arrived for the opening of that first school, all of the ophthalmology supplies were there as well. The school was opened. They had a magnificent ceremony for me there for the opening of the school. And we met with the ophthalmologists who desperately asked my husband to come back, bring his colleagues, do whatever they could to come back and operate or educate, do whatever they could. So now not only was I not sleeping at night about what I could do to help this community I had come to know and love, my husband was also now frantically calling who in the world could come and help. And he found an organization called Orbis. And Orbis has a flying eye hospital. And after a year of working with the government of Niger to get permits and requests and official letters of invitation and Eddie's nonstop work to make it happen, we went back a couple of years later And Eddie and I landed on the tarmac, and our good friend Ron, I must mention at this moment that throughout this first few years, when I was frantically doing everything, not knowing anything I was doing, Ron was my guide, my mentor. He had done philanthropic work all over the world. And I would always have dinner with him and Eddie, and I'd say, am I doing this right? Should I do this differently? And Ron said, you're going to Niger with Orbis? I'm coming. And I'm bringing a photographer, and I'm bringing a videographer, and I'm bringing a journalist, and we're going to document everything you've done. And together we went, and as we landed the plane, when we landed in Niger, imagine the overwhelming emotions to see that big Airbus airplane with an operating theater inside that had been organized and initiated by Eddie and by all of the work that had been done. And for those number of days, ophthalmologists from different parts of the world trained eye doctors in that airplane on new techniques, on things to do. And because of my connection to Labore, they came and examined 400 women, men, and children in Labore and spent a day. And 95 of those people received afterwards sight-saving surgery that happened over the course of the next many months. Many things have happened in the 18 years since that trip happened. We have since we've built 3 schools, we have built 14 kindergartens, and when kindergartens burned, not ours, but when kindergartens burned in Niamey and little kindergarten children were killed, I vowed that all the kindergartens that we built would no longer be straw. We would build them out of cement, and we immediately did a fundraiser so that we could rebuild the kindergartens we had done. And we have done multiple programs over those years. The biggest program that we have done in the course of all these years has been farming. I met a man named Dov Pasternak, who was the man who introduced drip irrigation into China. Israel is where he is from, and Israel is known for the desert and the Negev and making the desert bloom. After working in Israel, he moved to Niger, and he wanted to help the desert in Niger grow fruits and vegetables 12 months of the year. And so I heard about him. Of course, not only did I not know anything about international development, I knew nothing about farming. I don't even have my own garden. But I decided that from Dov's words, the only way to lift a people out of poverty is through agriculture, not through anything else we do. They need to feed themselves, but they need to do more than have food security. They need to have what he called Toyota security. And that means you don't grow food in order just to eat. You grow food in order to make an income. And the income gives you the freedom to buy cars, to buy education for your children, to buy supplies and all kinds of things that you want in your life. That is lifting someone out of poverty, not subsistence, not just enough to eat and get by today, enough to make money to have a living for your family. And so for the past 15 years, we have started income generating gardens for women. And with Dove and an NGO in the United States, together we started many income generating gardens, taught the women how to get water out of the ground through irrigation, through wells, through multiple ways so that you don't wait for it to rain. If you wait for it to rain, you'll get fruits and maybe millet and rice 3 months of the year. If you learn how to get water from the ground, you can grow all seasons of the year. And so we have been doing that until 2018, when Dove passed away. But we had decided with Dove that what we could do as a small NGO in Canada and a small NGO in the United States, we could create a school that would teach technicians how to farm fruits and vegetables, how to irrigate. There weren't enough technicians in the country of Niger to teach them how to do all of this farming. And so we decided to start a school. Dove was not alive to see the school open. In fact, it's opening in October of this year, October 14th. It is a multi-million-dollar school, the first of its kind in West Africa and for sure in Niger. And it will open its doors in only a few weeks' time. And despite the coup that overtook the country of Niger a year ago, and despite everything that's happened and the economy that's gone down and everything else, we are opening that school. Even if we only have 12 or 13 students, we will open our doors. And I just want to end my part by saying the most important lesson that I have learned from all of this that I want to impart to you. Look at me. I am just a woman. I'm 70 years old now. I have no experience in this. All I had, I was one person with colleagues around me. I just had a desire to make a difference in somebody's life. That's all. With no knowledge, no skill, no background, no language, cultural differences. And so the lessons that I learned, I share with you, and I wrap them up in the 3 words DNA. We all think of our DNA as something that separates us, right? Each one of us has our own DNA, but what I find in common in our DNA is our humanity. So the D in DNA is for do it afraid. I am a fearful person. Everything I have done that I've told you about and summarized for you, I have done with fear. But I've decided to do it afraid anyway. So if you have fear in your life and you're afraid to start something, do not let that fear stop you. My favorite quote is by a science fiction writer, Ray Bradbury, who said, "Walk to the edge of the cliff, jump off, and build your wings on the way down." You don't need to have the business plan. You don't need to know what you're doing. You don't have to have it all sorted out. Just do it afraid. The N is for no limitations. You know how people will say, you can't do that. It's too hard. It's too far. Robin, it's dangerous. Don't go. There was a book that Ron edited, and one of the quotes in that book said, if people tell you things are undoable or unchangeable, if it's written in stone, get out your hammer and chisel. You do not listen to anyone who wants to stop you before you start. Nothing should stop you. And the A in DNA is for abandon your expectations. At the beginning, I was so terrified that everybody would expect me to succeed and that they would expect that I would do certain things. I would build this many things. I would raise this much money. And I thought, no, I'm not going to worry about what anybody else expects. I will just do the best that I can do. If something good happens, that's great. And if it doesn't, I've still given it my best shot. And it was a lesson for me and for my whole team. And with that, I now want to turn over to the man who has not focused only on one country of philanthropy, but who has focused on multiple countries throughout his life, has been a source of inspiration and influence in my life. And I want him to share his amazing story of all the things that he's done for others around the world.
Wow. But before all that, I want to ask you about Pencils for Kids. What facet of Pencils for Kids? I know it's hard. This is a difficult question, but what makes you most proud? Is it the people of Niger themselves stepping up?
It's, you know, the old adage in the Bible, it is best to teach a man to fish than to give him a fish. Nothing I did would have made one bit of difference if, as Ron said, they didn't want it for themselves. If they don't, and I learned about international development the right way. You don't do what you want to do. You go into a community and you ask them what they need. What do they want to do? What will they commit to do? What are they going to honor in terms of their commitment? So it's absolutely the people of Niger, who I have found to be the most kind, gracious, culture, they may have nothing, but they will give you the shirt off their back. So it's the people. The thing I'm proudest of, in addition to that, is that we stayed. There was a coup last year. The French were kicked out. The Americans are gone. The Canadians are gone. The Chinese are there. But every organization that I know is no longer there. A lot of people left. We stayed. Despite the hardships, despite everything going against us, we've stuck it out. And we've let the people know, you're family. We care about you. And I think that's something I am so proud of. Whether I send money in the years to come and things dwindle in that respect, it doesn't matter. We will always be in their corner. And the programs we've started, as they have told me, as the mayor has told to me, he said they will continue on in the hearts, the scholarships for girls, the schools, they will continue. So I am just so proud of the people for working so hard to make these things happen. It is them, truly.
To continue on just with Pencils for Kids, when I was there, I had made the local chief de canton, the local regional chief, a promise. Now, he didn't speak English. By the way, this guy looked like Omar Sharif. This guy's breathtakingly good looking, was a very quiet, Sagin, somebody who listened to what he said. And I said, look, you don't know me, but I'm coming back. In some way, shape, or form, I'm coming back. And he was very polite. And hours later, he showed up at our hotel room and at our hotel, and he gave me a little plaque from the people of Libori and that region. So, you know, I have a lot of things on the go. I was running a business, my family, whatever, my charitable work, but I started thinking, well, what can I do? So there was an old age home that closed in Hamilton, Ontario. And they called me and they said, would you happen to need some hospital beds? And I said, sure. So I organized and we collected these, I don't know how many hospital beds, 80, 60, whatever it was. And then I dropped a container. Now, getting to Niger, container to Niger, I have worked in Africa extensively. It's not easy. It's difficult in terms of theft. It's difficult in terms of logistics. But I thought, okay, I'm just going to, like, Niger is landlocked. It's not easy. But I dropped a container and we loaded up those hospital beds. And then we loaded up, people from your organization brought school supplies, paper, wheelchairs. Anyway, clothing from a company called Moore's Clothing for Men donated much brand new clothing. So between the hospital beds, we stuffed every square inch of that container with stuff. And Dr. Mednick put on some much needed medical equipment for ophthalmology, sewing machines, because there's a sewing center that Robin hasn't even spoken about for young women, all kinds of things, and off it went. Also, Robin mentioned when we were there, there was a need for to train midwives, and I knew well the need. My company had done a lot of work with midwifery around the world, so we decided to give packages of medical equipment for the midwives to use in their work. And then we thought, well, we can't just give them stuff. We need to train them. So we asked the local physician come and train them better in terms of their tasks at hand. And then we saw, I think I saw a medical clinic there. The medical clinic, pretty rough. It had one functioning room. So we decided to slowly and incrementally clean it up. So we had it parched and painted, and those medical hospital beds and whatever, small medical equipment, pots and pans and whatever, stainless steelware went to that clinic. So slowly and incrementally, we helped pull the situation forward.
He also provided, Ron's contribution alone was extraordinary. Not only the medical clinic was completely revamped, health kits were sent to every single school so that they would have a first aid kit in the schools. Education of the midwives, the training of them. The container was so gigantic. We had pictures coming back of hospital beds all over the entire community that were there, that went to the hospital in addition to the medical clinics that were there. Think of this, the ambulance in Labore is a donkey and a cart. So what Ron provided was absolutely extraordinary. He didn't stop. He continued to do this throughout the years that I have been there.
Well, don't tell my wife. Okay, so I'll move on to what I wish to tell you this evening. So I owned a medical company for about 40 years until I retired just during the pandemic. And I guess if I have a theme in terms of charitable gifting, the theme would be to try to give a gift that goes on giving. So my firm mostly worked with in women's and children's health, which means medical and surgical equipment, everything from the smallest surgical instrument up to very complex pieces of medical equipment. And, you know, as a medical company, every day I would receive about 10 calls looking for donations. And it became a little bit, it becomes a little bit much. You can't always give. But, you know, we sorted wheat and chaff and we would do what we could do. And I would like to read you a bit of a laundry list, but just to give you an idea over almost 40 years. So we received a call once from some nurses in Kitchener, Ontario, and they run an NGO called Cover Her World. Cover Her World is very unique. It deals with young girls, teaching them hygiene. And so what they basically do is they send over women's undergarments, brand new undergarments. They send over all kinds of personal hygiene products. And then they also go there and teach. So we decided, my company was next door to a company that sold women's clothing, and we approached them and they said, sure, we'll help you out. And they sold me at very little money, I think 3,000 pieces of undergarments for young girls. So that went off to, I think they mostly were working in Tanzania. Nakaru, Kenya, I've worked extensively in almost every African country, but Kenya is one of my favorites, not just because the weather there is absolutely perfect. It's like 75 degrees every day. But we had met a young woman who, I was taking a taxi out in the desert somewhere, and a young woman asked, in that culture, if you're going in a direction, people will ask if they can join you to save cost. So a young woman came with me and asked if she'd go back to Nairobi. And I said, well, what do you do? She said, well, I run a hospice. I said, you run a hospice? I said, well, how many beds? She said, 100 beds. Now in Canada, a large hospice is 10 beds. 5 is usually quite common. I helped with a hospice in Northern Ontario. It was 5 beds. Now it's 10 after 10 years. So I thought, wow, 100 beds? Like that's unheard of. And she said, yeah, it was a defunct hospital. And she told me a story about her father dying of cancer, of prostate cancer, at 60 years of age, at home, no meds. And she took care of her father. And she said, there must be a better way. So she started this hospice. So what we did is, I said to her, you don't know me, but I'll give you a call. And 6 months later, I called her and I went to Kenya, to Nakaru, which, by the way, that's where all the pink flamingos in the world come from, Nakaru, Kenya, with a team, a palliative care team. And we ended up giving talks and whatever. And anyway, we raised 69,000 US on that one. We brought in a palliative care speaker, and people stepped up, and a local Toyota dealer donated a brand new Toyota van for the hospice volunteers. So we did that. Also in Kenya, we had met the chief of the Pokot tribe. There's 2 tribes in Kenya, the Maasai, which are very famous, they have 7 million people, and the Pokot, which has about 500,000 people. And we met the chief, an elderly gentleman, but his granddaughter is the only woman in their tribe to go to university, and she spoke fluent English. And in speaking with her, she told me that she had founded an organization called Educate Me, Don't Circumcise Me, against what's called FGM, which is female genital mutilation. It's a barbaric cultural practice that has all kinds of problems attached to it. So I said, well, what do you need? And she said, I'd like to open an office. So we funded that office with the computers and gave her T-shirts with her name, and we did a little video of her work, and she's still moving today in terms of her work there. In Ethiopia with Dr. Jane Philpott. Dr. Philpott is a dear friend. She wanted to open up a family practice program in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, there is no such thing as a family practitioner. They graduate and they go into a specialty immediately. And then if you're in a specialty and you're working in a village, you have to do everything. Even if you're an ophthalmologist, a gynecologist, general surgeon, you have to see everything that walks in the door. So she started a family practice program there at the Black Lion Hospital, and we flew in and we, for the first 12 graduates, we helped them with doctor's kits. It's called a Boston bag filled with things. And one of the cool things, we gave them lab coats, which is traditionally what a physician would wear on their rounds in the hospital. And we put their names on the lab coats. Now, they had never seen this in Ethiopia. This is unheard of, putting your name on a lab coat. So when I came back a year later, they had expanded on that name. In their culture, down the lab coat was their whole life story, who their father and uncle and grandfather. And we thought, I think we're so proud of this. We thought, wow, that's really cool. It's kind of advertising your practice. But anyway, around the world, in Peru, we worked with the University of Alberta in urogynecology. Women in that country rarely have prenatal care. So they end up with complications, birthing that unfortunately ends up with severe urinary incontinence issues. So we supplied medical and surgical products and also help pay for nurses to go in and train local support in all the villages, rural villages. In Guatemala, I was approached out of an organization in Waco, Texas, that was trying to build 3 orphanages. And we gave them advice, we gave them some money, and it's called Anthony's Place after a young man who passed away. But these 3 orphanages are probably the most beautiful orphanages I've ever seen. For very little money, 3, 5,000 square foot buildings were put up on a beautiful campus, obviously from love, and we're very proud of that. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there's a long story to this, but there's an orphanage there, an HIV orphanage called Bread of Life, founded by the Scarborough Fathers of Toronto back in 1947. When I walked in, the Scarborough Fathers no longer exist as a Catholic organization. So the place was in pretty rough shape. They were moving kids from room to room because whenever it rained, the ceilings were pouring, and they had nothing. So we rebuilt it. And actually, that building is now being torn down. And in probably our largest funding, we rebuilt it again as a separate building in a $1.2 million program. But I will tell you at the end of all this about the children there and all the birthday parties, pizza parties we would fund with these kids. In Cuba, I had an idea of building a hospice, which would be a respite home, which would be self-funded. Now, in all over the world, hospices, there's no money, and people don't want to talk about death. Death is, of course, a part of life, but people don't want to talk about it. People don't want to fund it. So I had an idea, and of course, in Canada, it costs a great deal of money I've been involved with many hospices in Canada, but I wanted to try something and with limited funding. So we essentially bought a house and turned it into an Airbnb, but we always left one room open for 2 reasons: for palliative care, but also in Cuba, if you are from a small village, you come into Havana to have surgery. So you end up probably sleeping on a park bench the night before. You get your surgery and then they kick you out. And there, if you're having surgery, you have to bring your bed linens, you have to bring food, you bring soap, you have to bring medical supplies. So we thought, well, maybe we can address some of these issues. So, but the Airbnb, the idea being that it would fund a room or 2 left for people coming in, or people, and after surgery or whatever, they could come back there, and before they went back to their village, spend the night or two. So we did that. And we left little cards in all the other rooms saying, well, if you're a tourist visiting here, this is what we're doing here. We won't take money, but what we'll do is we'll take supplies, food, soap, shampoo. And it became absolutely incredible. Everybody who visited that Airbnb for the next few years supplied thousands of dollars of things that we got to put together, little care packages. And when people came for their surgeries or whatever, or even people who were palliative came, we took care of them. We could afford to take care of them and even give the family while they were staying in Havana some things. PSWs. My mom had a stroke. I had problems finding good PSWs. So we started helping to fund and develop curricula for PSWs coming to Canada. And so we funded a school in Kathmandu, Nepal, in Thailand with a hospital group that I was involved with, and in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which has a long history as a Commonwealth country with Canada. So we helped fund these schools, and we worked with Canadian organizations like Toronto Alzheimer's and other ALS organizations to build a wider curriculum. We built a medical clinic in Lahore, Pakistan. I was approached by some physicians who wanted a clinic for women and children, and there was no money, but we managed to get products and help them out financially a little bit. There were some physicians in the US traveling to Central America, to the most remote rural villages in the mountains once a year. So every year they would call us and ask us for surgical products and things to help them in their journey. Another thing we would do is I would buy millions of dollars of the medical supplies on Amex to collect the points. And those points we'd use to fly people from poor countries, third world countries, into Canada for surgeries. And we would take care of their surgery. Usually it was done pro bono. But we would take care of them while here and then fly them back. And we'd also fly in, let's say, a mother or, somebody from the family as well while they were here for their. So even in retirement now, I continue to do things. Even in retirement, I collect hospital beds, wheelchairs. I think we've sent 5,000 used wheelchairs into the Caribbean, mostly to St. Lucia, but to other countries. We have donated toys and teddy bears and those plushy toys. I think about 100,000 for holidays, whether it be Christmas, Easter, Hanukkah, into chronic care facilities, kind of to bring a smile, into hospices, into street missions, community outreach. So these are the kind of things. So all these are fancy and complex situations of care around the world, but forget about all that. I want to tell you about something that kind of brought all this about. When I was a small boy, growing up in a small town just north of Toronto in the early 1960s. And I was a Toronto Star paperboy. And I noticed that every Thanksgiving, they had a food drive. And I thought, that's really cool. I can maybe do something in my hometown. So without plan, I knocked on businesses on their door. It was a very small town. Everybody knew everybody. And I said, would you like to donate to this food drive? And they went, well, kid, come back after work and we'll talk about it. And, I was undaunted. I kept knocking on doors, and the companies, those days, people delivered milk and bread to your door. So these type of firms, I went to big food chains like Loblaws, and everybody said, well, maybe. So I go home. I think, well, this hasn't worked. This is going nowhere fast. So I was a little bit depressed. I go home, getting ready for dinner, doing my homework. My mom says, would you look out the window here? And I look out the window, and there's a long line of cars and trucks. And I think, oh no. So I open the door, and they say, okay, we've brought food, and we have socks and shoes and mitts. And my mother looks at me and said, well, son, you started this. We're going to need help because I'm not doing this with your dad. We need help. So luckily, I had a girlfriend who, just by chance, had 12 brothers and sisters. And we had a party line those days. So I got on the phone, and so the whole town knew was up because everyone listened on our party line. And sure enough, everybody shows up, and we start packaging up the stuff. So we do all these food hampers. And it was really cool. I saw like community coming together, like people who we knew each other, but we didn't know each other. And they came to our home and everybody was helping package things. And my mom said, well, who are you going to give it to? And I went, I don't know. So my girlfriend, who at the time, who was, I wouldn't say religious, but she was a practicing Catholic. She said, well, there's something called St. Vincent de Paul at our church. Why don't you go talk to them? And here's the guy's name. He runs it. So he was a businessman. I knock on his door. I'll never forget. He answered the door. He was half shaved. It looked like a Norman Rockwell print. He was like half shaved. He said, what do you want? And I said, well, I need a list of poor people in town. He goes, no problem. Come on in. So he sat at his kitchen table. We sat at his kitchen table. He wrote a long list. And I thought this was, I didn't think of being intrusive. I just went and knocked on his door and he did what he did. So I came back and my dad said, well, I'll help you deliver all these packages. So we had an old station wagon and we loaded it up and off son and father go. And it was a little bit depressing. I'm like, a lot of these people lived in homes better than my parents' home. A lot of them had pretty nice cars. So I'm thinking, maybe this was a stupid idea. So I'm thinking, well, okay. So I get home and my mom says, there's one package you forgot. And I look on my list and there was one family that I hadn't delivered to, but they were on the edge of town. They had a rundown house in the middle of a field, kind of scary stuff. Plus, I knew the kids in that home, the children in that home, and they were pretty scary kids. I thought, I don't want to go there. My dad was putting on his cap and coat, and my mom kind of pushed me at the door with this thing. And I went, okay. So we go to this house, and it was right out of the twilight zone, a house in the middle of a field. It's dark. There's a full moon out, and it's scary. And I'm thinking, I don't want to do this. And my dad says, go. So I kind of sneak up to the front door, and I put down this basket. I was going to run away, and the door opens up. There's a woman and her husband, and they go, is this for us? I said, yes, kind of squeaked out. And I'm backing up, and they go, well, come on in. So out of sheer fear, I walk into this home. I had never seen a home like this. The floors were dirt. Now, I'd seen a lot of poverty, even growing up in Ontario, but I'd never seen a home with dirt floors. It was clean, it was organized, but the floors were dirt. And there's a potbelly stove, which is no big deal. That was common those days. A little Christmas tree in a corner with hand cut out ornaments out of paper. And the people were so incredibly gracious. They said, wow, this is so lovely. And the kids were just incredible. They were just thanking me, thanking me. I'm getting embarrassed. I'm thinking, wow. I'm kind of trying to back out. And they said, well, would you join us for something to eat? And I went, no, my mom has, no, dinner had been long over, but I said, no, my mom has dinner on the table. So I backed out. And they thanked me all the way to the door and out the door. And I get into the car and I think, wow, even these people who are poor could be gracious and kind and giving. And it taught me a lesson of not making assumptions. So I went away, thought, okay, out of maybe, I don't know about the other families, but this one family made it all worthwhile. So the following year, my parents owned a small business, and as my brothers and I I wouldn't say forced, but it was understood that you would work in the summer months for free. I didn't want to work for my dad for free. So in our high school, there was a little sign. It said camp counselors wanted for a camp called Camp Bellwood near Laura, near Kitchener. $40 a week. I went, wow, $40, a lot of money those days. And live in, and I thought, okay, I can, my parents won't turn this down, so I'm gonna go be a camp counselor. Well, when I got there, I guess if there's a lesson, always read the small print. The camp was for mentally handicapped children and developmentally handicapped children. I had no idea. And I got put into a cabin with two other counselors of the most severely developmentally handicapped kids. But what an epiphany. Wow, these kids taught me things that I could go on for hours. And I left there after 2 months. I went back to my hometown. I thought, well, like I'd seen the odd person around town, but I thought there was more. So I thought I'll get together some kids and some of my friends, and we'll maybe bring them all together once a week to give the parents a break. So there was a school, King George School, which was decommissioned, run by the town. I went to the town council. I said, would you lend me a classroom? They said, sure. And I got some friends together and we put out the word that we could give the parents a break if they drop their charge off, Thursdays from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And we got about 15, 20 people out. Now they ranged in age from 10 to 50. And at first, the parents were a little bit, like worried. They didn't quite trust what we're up to. So they hung around. And then later, as they got to know us, they had never, they didn't have time for themselves. They were always taking care of their loved one. So, what did we do? Well, we had arts and crafts, and we sang songs, and people would bring homemade pastries. And so that's what we did. So along comes Christmas, and it was put upon me to do something. And I came from a secular family, so I didn't quite understand what to do. But somebody proposed that we do the nativity scene and do, the meeting of Christmas. So I didn't know quite how to approach this, but I knew an elderly woman who'd been a missionary. So I approached her and I said, "Would you be my advisor, my academic advisor?" She said, "Sure." So we get organized and we put together a play, and we run for 2 or 3 weeks, and it was a disaster. The kids couldn't remember their lines. They were running in every direction. I thought, oh, this isn't going to work. But we'll do what we can do. There was one young boy called David. He was the cutest kid. He was 10 years old, very precocious, probably ADHD in days long before Ritalin. And those days, you have to remember, it wasn't people who were mentally handicapped from birth. Everybody was thrown in, like everybody on the spectrum, autism, everybody, they were all thrown in. So I had a lot happening with really very little or no training. But this young boy was absolutely cute as a button. And his brothers came to me and said, "Look, he really wants to be in this play. So find him a part in this play." So I thought, okay. So we had the inn that Mary and Joseph come to. And I thought, I'll make him the innkeeper. Because all he has to, according to the nun or this missionary, all he has to say 3 times in a row is, "We have no room, we have no room, we have no room." So the night comes, the big night comes, and it all comes together. The parents showed up they put their kids and their loved ones into bathrobes that looked like, desert garments. They had big bath towels on their head that looked like they're from, Arabian Nights. Canes turned into staffs. Everybody was dragging like a pet stuffed teddy bear, a zebra. It's very Disney. But anyway, and the whole thing went off absolutely perfect. Like there wasn't a hiccup. I thought, wow. So big audience, along comes maybe 50 people in this little cramped classroom, parents and loved ones watching their loved ones. So Mary and Joseph come to the inn, and the inn was 2 chairs, a plank, and a sheet for a roof. And David sitting behind this. And Joseph says to the innkeeper, "Do you have a room for the night?" And young David looks out at his brothers, he looks at his parents, he looks at me. He says, "We have no room." And I thought, okay, 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. I thought, oh, he goes, "We have no room." I thought, good. Well, even if that's it, that's not bad. And it was a long time. And then he yells at the top of his voice, "But you can sleep in my room." And he runs out. He runs to the back of the class and he hides behind me. And everyone's stunned. And I didn't know what to say. So to break the ice, I said, "Wow, Dave, what a great line." And he says, "Mr. Ron, they can sleep with me." Well, this young, precocious, beautiful boy with mild Down syndrome taught, just like the Magi gave a gift. Don't make assumptions. He gave the gift of kindness innately. And I'll never forget that in my life, in my journey, many people have taught me these things. So I went through a laundry list of all the things around the world that we've done. But all along the way, there was lessons to be learned. As Robin, you said, you started out just by making a phone call. And what I would like to say to everyone here is, don't be afraid. There are big things and small things. The small things can be, your next door neighbor has lost her husband. Bake a casserole. I don't know if you bake a casserole, but bring some food. Knock on the door. Maybe you've never talked to them. I'm not sure what they're going to say, but just reach out. Reach out. because kindness breeds kindness. And through that, we all have our trials and tribulations in life, but I can assure you that by doing acts of kindness, even small acts, it does act as a balm or a salve to your own trials and tribulations. So, two more things. I mentioned the Bread of Life orphanage. On the island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, when HIV became prevalent, nobody wanted to deal with the children. The young child had HIV, nobody would deal with that child. So there was a nun there called Sister Zita, who I got to know. I've often been a little bit hesitant to become involved with organizations of different communities of faith because of certain reasons, but this nun was absolutely incredible. She took in every child on those islands. It's a group of islands who had HIV. But the problem was the local kids would ostracize them, like who didn't want to talk to these kids or deal with these children. So I said, well, I will fund birthday parties for all the children in the orphanage. We'll have pizza and Pepsis or Cokes, and I'll give everybody, not only the child, but everybody in the orphanage a toy that night. But you have to invite in the local village, and I'm going to give all those kids, whoever comes, a toy. And they said, no, they won't come. I said, well, let's try it. I would say within 6 months, we had every kid in that village at that orphanage playing with those kids. Well, who's going to turn down free pizza and Cokes? But proving that if you just try, I think that whole program, which we ran for about a year, cost me about $1,000, but it wasn't $1,000. Can you imagine that all of a sudden those kids are no longer lepers? They are now, and now they're accepted as kids. In Cuba, there's an organization called Senesex. It's run by Mariela Castro, President Raul Castro's daughter, whose mother founded this organization. And they also work with HIV people in Cuba. And she runs a major organization. But I had found that although they have about 110 volunteers that go into homes and literally, like PSWs, take care of people, no one had ever thanked them. No one had ever said, thank you for your work. So I decided to go in, and Cuba was just opening up. It went from 3 restaurants in Havana to maybe 50. So there was a brand new nightclub called King's Bar. It was a pretty fancy nightclub. And I went to them and I cut a deal for very little money to have a party and have free food and whatever. And I went to the local dollar store in the neighborhood and bought Buena Vista hats and little gifts. And we invited them all in. But the problem was some of them came from far, far towns and villages. So I said, well, we'll fund the $50 bus ride. So we get 110 people coming in. And they came in like beaten animals. So this is a communist country. Officially in communism, poverty doesn't exist. Problems don't exist. You can't discuss these issues publicly. But they came in and it was like, why did you invite us here? And I said, we just want to thank you. We want to thank you for all that you do. And by the way, here's a hat and here's some t-shirt or whatever. We actually invited Mariela Castro to come, and she came. We didn't think she would, but she came. And she's the daughter of the president. She's a member of parliament. And she came, and we had a band come and play. By the end of that evening, people were having fun, were laughing and dancing and singing. And one fellow came up to me and said, you know, this is fantastic. Will you come back? And I went, well, maybe, but maybe you can do this next year. He said, well, we can. You know, we can do this. I said, well, you can do this. But can you imagine that nobody had ever thanked them? Finally, final story. In Cuba, the same thing. We went to an orphanage with teddy bears. Somebody gave me about 250 teddy bears, really nice ones. So we go out. This orphanage is run by nuns who have been on that island over 100 years. So we hand out the teddy bears and doing our thing. I have to go. And word gets out to the kids that I have to go. So every kid in the room came and dropped the teddy bear in front of me. Why? They had never been given a gift. The concept of a gift was beyond them. They did not understand this concept of a gift. And it really taught me some humility, but also I had to explain. And I'll never forget the looks in those kids' faces as they got to keep that teddy bear. They were hugging it like I was going to rip it off, rip it out from them as I walked at the door. But can you imagine the concept of doing something where you fundamentally change their worldview? There are people in the world who care enough to give me something. So these are some of the stories. I'm in awe of Robin's work because she focused in her work, Pencils for Kids, which is much more than what she told you this evening. It's absolutely breathtaking. My work was more band-aids around the world. I did work in over 50 countries. We did train nurses, and we brought in medical equipment, and probably thousands of hospital beds, which were donated, which we ship, were donated to us, and wheelchairs and medical equipment and whatever. But my idea that I would start something and hopefully would have sustainability and get legs of its own. And if there wasn't sustainability, well, then I couldn't solve all the problems. So there you have our story.
And this is why he's my hero.
Oh.
And just to end by telling you that when Ron was with me in Niger, we went to what they called the handicapped center one day. You okay, Yang? Yeah, it's all okay?
Someone tried to come in on this event,
Oh.
but get in. Yeah.
And I just want to say that in this little handicap center, which was basically a hole in the wall, there were people who didn't have wheelchairs sitting on the ground and making volleyballs and basketballs, stitching them. They had absolutely nothing. And Ron and I looked at each other, and you could see right away that what Ron has described to you about all the work he's done around the world, it's because this man's heart is so huge that when he sees someone suffering or a problem that he sees a solution to, his mind immediately goes to what can I do? And from that moment on, we went and did something for those people. Mm-hmm. Do you remember? But everything he's told you is just a drop in the bucket for the work that he's done around the world. And without Ron at my side and guiding me and encouraging me and reinforcing my worries along the way, I've never been able to accomplish the few things that we did. And you can just see the extent and size of this man's heart. And if we can take even a part of that heart for each of us in our own daily lives, we will have accomplished so much.
So
thank you so much for
thank you, Robin,
listening to our stories.
So look, we're going to take some questions if anybody has.
For country like Africa, you could do this. How could one do charity work in like country like China and maybe other more strict countries now, like Iran or some other countries?
Robin, would you like me to?
Yeah,
some lights. I'm not asking for a solution. I'm thinking. Yeah.
And I'm not saying this for any other reason. I've traveled China extensively for 40 years, and I've actually helped furbish a hospital outside of Shanghai.
Yeah.
In many communist countries around the world, Cuba is communist, completely communist. St. Vincent and the Grenadines isn't communist; it's democracy, but it has a communist party in power at the moment. So under communism, poverty doesn't exist. Everything is perfect. Yeah. But things change. I believe I have the greatest respect for China. Things will change in China. And with that change will bring opportunity. For me, wherever I go in the world, I find that good people are good people. And we can't paint with any kind of a brush. We don't know. But there's one thing that Dostoevsky said, the famous Russian writer. He said, only the heart knows what is precious. Only the heart knows what is precious. And there are many people in totalitarian regimes that want to help, and they do help. They help quietly, without making it a big deal. In Africa, I'm sure Robin will say that she has had her challenges, but it shouldn't stop you. It shouldn't stop. I'm not saying go against party line or government official line, but prepare yourself. And maybe there are other things that you can do, which stay away from politics, stay away from the official rules that still offers kindness. It doesn't mean going in and, dealing with medical issues or, complex situations. You can do things very quietly that, and it's funny, I'm often asked, I'm babbling on here, but I'm often asked or told, oh, when you gave all that stuff, the local member of parliament or the local politician took credit. And I go, I don't care. Let's still got to where it's going. I'm not involved with the politics. I don't care. Maybe even became more efficient when the government got a little bit involved. No, I don't want them to, use it as a propaganda tool and, down the Caribbean or wherever. But it shouldn't stop you from doing small acts of kindness that I think it's like planting a garden. You plant the seeds and something will grow. It's like a writer. When you write something, or if you're a poet or whatever, or an artist, you don't know that your work of art or your poem or your story is going to blossom into something. Yeah. You have to take that chance, a leap of faith. And that's what I would say to you in terms of China. China is a very complex situation, but things change. And before that, there are still things you can do which will not affect, will not cause difficulties, I believe.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ron, I have a question for you. So you're a businessman. So to do business successfully, you need to make profit.
Yes.
And then you do a lot of charity work. Like, how do you balance this?
Yang, not that I was very blessed. I was a typical child of immigrants. My parents came to Canada with nothing, and over a great deal of time and from a lot of hard work, became very successful. And in my life, I had to make a decision. I'm secular. I don't belong to any community of faith, but I had to make a decision how I wanted to live and how, when I'm no longer here, what I was leaving behind. Yes, believe me, I went through all the Porsches and penthouses and stuff, but it's all, for me, it rang very hollow. And so I directed all the non-essential operating revenues of my company to charitable work. And I used Superior, as Robin knows, as a platform. So I could access my suppliers and say, hey, don't donate, but sell me at cost, give me a deal. And or can I use your logistics? And people using my company, I did that. But I didn't do it for, I have great respect for all communities of faith, but I didn't do it for a spiritual reason. I did it because it's my value system, and it's my faith. I don't talk about things. I do things. And then it's not that it always works. Sometimes it doesn't work. But unless you try, you never know.
I have a question. You obviously influenced all kinds of people all over the world. How have you influenced other successful business people in doing what you're doing?
Right now, I'm beating up a lot of successful construction people in Toronto to help the government of St. Vincent. They had a volcanic eruption that destroyed a whole part of their main island, and they've had a lot of hurricanes, but Hurricane Beryl destroyed 2 of the islands. 95% were flattened. But everyone's tired, right? We're tired of charity. We're tired of, people reaching out. And that government, that country has 114,000 people spread over dozens of islands. So I'm beating up some fairly wealthy people in the city of Toronto. And I'm saying, don't give me money. I don't want money. Money is very dangerous. But give me construction supplies, things left over from job sites. Let them, they're happy to build their own homes back. But so give me roofing materials, give me plumbing supplies. So I'm trying now, of course, people are hesitant. Like, what's going to happen? Is it going to get down there and sold on the black market or whatever? But I don't, after knocking on some huge doors, out of the blue came, I won't mention the name because we're negotiating, a organization, a worldwide organization that is owned by one of the world's wealthiest men. And he said, you know what, we can do something. We're building warehouses all over the world, and we're going to bug our construction people building our multi-million square foot warehouses to donate something. So, but we need a plan. And so we're putting together that plan. So out of the blue, manna from heaven has dropped. And I'm not sure what, but we're proposing that they build 250 homes, or not, like, we're not saying build 250 homes. We're saying, look, how about just supplying roofing materials for 250 homes, or bathrooms for 250 homes, or a kitchen sink and a refrigerator for 250 homes, A or B or C or all the above. So, you know, if you reach out, I'm not saying this always helps. Many things fall flat. But if you have a clean heart, and you offer them something to hang their hat on, I think human nature is based in the positive. I think people want to help. And that was my opening remarks. I think people are afraid. We're afraid. We've been hurt. There's all kinds of nasty discourse out there. You know, charities are found out not to be what they were. Okay, that's fair enough, and that's going to happen. But unless you knock on that door and say, I heard your husband died. I'm so sorry, and I've made you this pie. I think that moves mountains. I really do. It's a ripple, and it's a ripple that it's a gift that can go on giving. In many of the situations I explained today, it wasn't that we gave things, which we did. Is we always were hoping that, you know, I would often give a piece of medical equipment to a family that needed a nebulizer or something for their baby. And I would say, when you don't need that, you're not selling it. You're going to give it to another family who needs this. When that wheelchair is no longer needed by your grandmother, find another family and don't sell it, because I'll find out and I'll come back and kill you. But people by and large are based on the positive. So gifts that go on giving, or just by reaching out and attempting. I think especially Canadians, we are a kind nation. If anything, we're known around the world for our kindness.
And I have a question for you. You have done all this charity work out of like from scratch. Can you share with us one or two or three? I mean, we are running out of time, but what is the biggest challenge you have had, and how did you do to overcome it?
Oh, there have been multiple challenges, many challenges, and many programs I didn't talk about, as Ron mentioned. Some failed. The community would say to me, let's see, where the children are not learning to speak well enough at an early enough age. Let's try a program in primary school. And so we would go to all the trouble of setting it up and working through it, but it didn't work for 100 reasons. And so among all the programs we started, some failed, some succeeded. I think probably the biggest challenges have just been, it's a different culture. They do things differently. You have to really, and that's what your organization is all about, truly, isn't it? Understanding the differences. And you have to go in with an open mind and an open heart. I like to do things fast and quick and get it done. Someone asks me to do something, I do it. When I go to Niger, things don't work at that pace. It's not the same. So at the beginning, and I mean the first 10 years, I could say, I need to show my Canadian government that something has been done in this particular way. And I would be calling 12 times and writing 10 emails and their understanding of what needed to get done urgently was so different than mine. It didn't make them worse than me. It just made me have to take a step back and understand that things are different for different cultures and they approach things differently. And we had the standard obstacles, floods and heat and destruction of crops, and particularly in agriculture. You could, we were called one day and there were floods that destroyed half of the fields that we had just built. One day they came up with an idea that we should invest in Marity goats, because it could make money for the women. You buy a goat and they multiply, or the goat, the milk of the goat can be sold. I arrived to Niger and I said, how are the Marity goats? The goats are missing. They're gone. I said, what do you mean they're missing? The goat herd, or the guy who was looking after the goats, he wasn't paying attention. They all went away. How do you lose 30 goats? And so finally they found the goats in somebody else's village. And in order to get the goats back, we had to pay, because the goats in the meantime were eating the fields of the place where they wandered to. So these are some of the little problems along the way. The major coup that happened, it broke my heart. It changed everything in Niger, everything. So my safety was an issue for the last 18 years. Sometimes did I go with armed guards, or would that bring attention to me as a white person, as a Canadian, as an aid worker? Or do I not go with any armed guards and take a chance that if somebody were to come after me, the people around me would protect me? Those decisions every day in the 18 years were the ones that would cause me to lose sleep. So the obstacles all the time were many. But one thing I learned, you have to change the way you define success. Really. It isn't always the building you build and the money that you might put in someone's hands or the garden crop that works. It could be as simple as someone coming up to you on a motorcycle one day, driving by me in Niger, and just lifting his hand and saying, merci. Something that simple. And I actually brought to show you, one day I was in a women's group and this woman comes up to me and she gives me this little torn piece of paper. And I've kept it all these years, and it's her name, Asa Amadou, and then an equal sign, and then the word friend. Mm-hmm. And I thought, if I've made a friend here, if that woman trusts me, if she feels a little bit better about her life and about her day, that's success. So you change the way, and I'm sure Ron agrees with me 100%, because he talks about the small acts of kindness. I don't expect that they will remember all the things that we've done, the successes, the failures, but I do know that they'll always look over and say, Canada cared about us. There were some people in Canada who stayed with us. When everybody left, they continued to stay. So despite the obstacles, despite all those obstacles, we stuck it out.
You're like Dr. Basu in China, because everyone in China remember Canada as a great country, as people, but because of Dr. Basu. He came to China in the anti-Japanese war. They helped China And so everybody in China remembers. So yeah, I guess you in Niger, it's like that, Dr. Basu.
Well, I'm honored by the comparison.
And I know Niger is a Muslim country, and
Yes.
you probably come from a very different culture, religion.
Yeah.
So how like and like the people receive you like um so much. So does that like impact you? Like give you some like you would like to share something?
You know something? It's a beautiful question. I'm Jewish. So now picture what you think it might be like. I'm a woman, so I'm a woman, I'm Jewish, I'm an aid worker. I mean, I have so many strikes against me in in the view of many people in the world. But when you don't work through the governments and you work on the ground, directly on the ground with neighborhoods, with families, with people, nobody cares what you are, who you are. You just get rid of all of those layers of things that don't matter. And the only example I can give you is on that very first trip with my daughter, Sam. There was one day she got sick, and we were very worried about her. And the mayor came and took her to a French clinic. And then he went to the mosque to pray for my daughter's health and well-being and recovery. I don't think you have to say anything more than that. It didn't matter. Was I Jewish? Was he Muslim? Is someone Christian? It just doesn't matter. Other people put those labels on the rest of us and try to make them matter. But all we care about, if you ask me what anyone in Niger cares about, they care about the same things you and I care about. Do their kids have an education? Are they healthy? Do they have something to wear and something to eat? Those are the fundamental things each and every one of us cares about. The rest of it, it doesn't matter. They know I'm Jewish. I know they're Muslim. I never ask. I don't go into politics. I don't want to know. I don't ask, because then all kinds of things come out. But the important thing is, do you care about me as a person? Do I care about you as a person? The answer is yes. And I do more for my own Judaism, I do more for my own culture, my own religion, by simply being a humanitarian and not caring what anybody else is. That speaks more about me and my faith than anything else. And I think that's how they feel as well. When he went to pray for her, he didn't care if she was Jewish and not Muslim. Really, you go on the ground and you meet people where they are, in their homes, in their families. And that really is all that matters.
That's a good human being. Thank you so much.
There was a
question online for Robin. If you can probably read, or is there a question online?
How would I know that?
Go to chat.
Oh, chat. Oh, yeah, chat. There are 3. Question for Robin. What made you and your friend who initially shared the story about the pencil different? What motivates you to take action? How can you persuade others to help? You know, sometimes, and Rana said this so eloquently, you don't often have to persuade anybody else to help. Everybody, I think, has a good heart. Most people do. And they're sitting and waiting and trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I start? Robin, I don't know where to go. I don't know. I could never do what you did. I couldn't pick up a phone. I'd be embarrassed. I'm shy. But there's so many people who want to do something good. And so when you start doing something and they see what you're doing, they ask you, "What can I help you, Robin? And all of a sudden, all of these people, and Ron has spoken about this, people who want to do something, they recognize a kindred spirit. And they right away, they say, okay, I can't do it on my own. I'm feeling a little shy about doing it, or I'm not sure where to start, but can you help me? And so I've always said to anybody, and I've been reached out to by hundreds of people over the years, as Ron has. And if they ever want to start something on their own, I will always say, talk to me. I'll share everything that happened good. I'll share all that happened bad. I'll stand by your side. I'll walk you through it. I will be for you what Ron has been for me. I will be by your side. I'll answer your questions. And so it's not so much a matter of persuading. I think people want to, they are just not sure how to start many times. And so you just need to be there on their side. And I can't answer what made me and my friend, why was this story different? I believe in fate. I mean, why else would I be moved? I mean, who is not moved by hearing 30 kids are sharing a pencil? But then not everybody will say, but what can I do, right? When it's so far away. But it just seemed so simple at the time. It's a pencil. We have pencils here. And all I was thinking was not a charity, not 18 years later. For goodness sake, all I was thinking was, I'll send pencils. That's all I need to do. But of course, once you do that, then you realize it's not really going to change their life. If you just send a pencil, then what happens? It's what are they going to get next? And again, it comes back to the story of the fish. That's why the farming, teaching them how to farm, teaching them how to make a living. The sewing center that we started with 4 girls in a little room. Now we have a full sewing school. But it starts from an idea to want to make them self-sufficient. And that's what it's about, giving them a way to be proud of themselves and earn their own living. Great question. Thank you for that, whoever asked it.
We have another question, but we are running out of. I want to ask this last question to Ed.
Yes.
You can tell us something about Robin.
Come on, Ed. Dr. Mednick.
We haven't got a few hours.
Sure.
She's the most amazing woman you could ever meet.
You're lucky.
And I am a very, very fortunate man. And
Here.
she is someone who's got the biggest heart, cares so much about everything and everyone. And
you're among them.
well, I'm lucky. As I say to people, I met her on a blind date, and I knew my sister set it up. And my sister said, call me after the date. Called my sister up. I said, I'm going to marry that girl. And
It was how many years?
That's 50 years ago. But anyway, you can hear what she's saying, how she says. You can hear the way she speaks, her feeling, and you can tell right away what kind of person she is.
And you're a great match. You're a great man as well.
Bravo.
We get along.
Well, thank you so much.
Yang, I'd like to say one final thing very quickly. I once wrote an official document for the government of Canada explaining Robin's work in Niger, and my final line was this, that Robin is proof positive that different cultures and communities of faith can work together. And that's all I wish to say.
Thank you.
It's because of this man. It's because of this man that I received that Governor General's Award. I would not have received it otherwise.
I'm very glad you both, like you all, came to us, share your stories.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much for
Thank you for listening
us.
to our stories.
For inquiries, please contact info@eawlc.org or visit our website at www.eawlc.org.